What's up, guys? In the last video now of our series on eccentric training methods, the last one that we're going to look at is doing overloaded eccentric with weight releases. Now, if you're going to do overloaded eccentrics, weight releases are the best method that you can use, not only because they add an instability element to the bar. So if we just go over and have a look, unlike in the previous examples where we've got plates on the bar, now that we've got weight hanging from the eccentric hooks, not only do we get the overloaded eccentric, we also get an effect similar to when we do the hanging band technique that we addressed in a previous video, where because the weight is hanging from the bar, it's going to be unstable as we go down and move around, and you're going to have to keep a better bar path and keep tighter to make sure that they don't move around too much and to keep it stable. Now, when we're setting up the weight releases, what we want to do is we want to put them towards the end of the bar, so they're away from the rack or the bench or whatever it might be that we're using them on. And we also want to make sure that we put a collar on the end there for obvious reasons. When we unrack the bar, if the bar is slightly uneven or moves around, it means the weight releaser can't come off the end, at least on one side, and make us unstable. So when we're setting the height for the weight releases, what we want to do is to have them come off as close to the bottom position as we can. So we've set these up for Naomi now so that they come off around 1/2 inch to 1 inch above the bottom of her squat. So that allows her to take the overload as far through the movement as she can, but it also allows her to relax a little bit and get a stretch reflex out the bottom, which is how she normally squats. The other thing that you need to take into account is how the weight releases are going to come off the bar. In this example here, with the rogue ones that we've got here, they're going to come forward. So we want to make sure that there's nothing that's going to stop them from coming forward. So when Naomi walks this out, there's going to be plenty of room for them to come off the bar. So in this example, when we're trying to use it as an overloaded eccentric, we have them all the way through. We want to make sure that the weight releases stay on the bar for as much of the lift as possible. So we've set these up for Naomi already, and they've set so that they come off around 1/2 inch to 1 inch above her bottom position. The reason we do that is, A, we want to make sure that they definitely come off when she goes to reverse the lift, but B, also that allows her to then speed up and get a bit more of a stretch reflex out the bottom of the lift because the extra weight has come off just before that point. Now, another way that you can use these to overload a sticking point and improve your mind-muscle coordination and stability, etc., at a sticking point, is to make them longer and then have them come off just after where your sticking point is. And what you then do is, say your sticking point is at the midpoint of the squat, you'd go down to that midpoint and you would pause in that position. So now you're pausing on the eccentric in that position with, say, 110 or 120% of your max, and teaching yourself how to stay tight and how to produce a lot of force in that position. Then once you start moving again, the hooks would come off and the extra weight would release, and then you can perform the rest of the rep as normal. Now, when you're performing these, they're a very intense method, just like the overloaded eccentrics we looked at in the previous videos. These aren't methods that you would just jump into straight away. You've done a series of videos now, and as you go through them, the methods kind of get more intense and demanding as you go through them. These are not something you jump into straight away if you haven't done any eccentric-based training before. You would start off with slow eccentrics and things like that, and slowly build up the percentages that you're controlling on these slower eccentrics until you end up in a position where you're doing something like this, where you're actually doing super maximal weights on the slow eccentric. So we wouldn't do these for more than, say, 3 or 4 weeks at a time because they are a very intense method. What will generally happen is you'll get very rapid strength gains from them, but if you start to do them for longer than that, you will also burn out. So 3 or 4 weeks, ideally before a peaking block, to get your body used to handling heavier loads or super maximal loads, and then take them out before your peak block so we don't have the increased recovery demands of this technique during that. So when we're performing the overloaded eccentrics with weight releases, we're going to be performing them in a cluster set manner, purely because we have to re-rack the bar and put the weight releases back on the bar anyway, but also because we're dealing with super maximal loads, it isn't something that we're going to be able to control for rep after rep without that short break in between. The other way that you could use them is as a primer for rep work, which you do earlier in your training cycle. So say, for example, you've got to do a set of 6, you could do the first rep with the weight releaser on the bar. So you say have 100 to 110% on the way down. The weight releaser then comes off. And then because of the extra nervous system activation that you have from the heavier load on the first rep, you can actually perform better in the reps that come after that without the weight releaser. So say you've got 80% on the bar, you'll do 110% on the way down with the first rep. That will then come off, and then you'll perform all your normal reps in a row with 80% on the bar. And once you get used to that stimulus, you'll actually be able to perform better with that 80% than you would if you didn't do the weight releaser work before it. But if we're doing these for max strength, they're generally going to be done with 80% or so on the bar in bar weight, and then we're going to be going up to 120% max done as a cluster set for anywhere between 2 and 5 reps. So if we watch Naomi perform a rep now, just like when we're doing the hanging band technique, it's important to let the bar and the weight releases stabilize a little bit after you take them out. So once she walks back, she's just going to let them settle for a second or two so they're not moving too much. Then she's going to begin her eccentric, which is going to be done with a controlled tempo. Even when we're doing, say, 110, 120% on the bar, we still want them to be able to control the eccentric phase. I'm back in. Now she's doing a pretty slow eccentric there. If that was 110, 120%, we may expect her to do it in, say, 3 seconds. It's not going to be super slow because the weight is so heavy. But if we're doing, say, 90 or 100% on the eccentric, we'd expect the lifter to still be able to do it with that slower eccentric tempo. Now, once she racks the bar, very simply, we put the weight releases back on. She would then take her prescribed rest period, which could be anywhere up to a minute in between reps if they really are very heavy, so 120% on the way down. Once her rest period is up, she'd do the same thing again. Let the bar stabilize, and then nice and slow. So when we're doing these type of lifts with the overloaded eccentric, generally we would do them all on one day. So we would do them for, say, the squat and the bench together in one workout, and we would usually only do, say, 2 working sets. So we might do 2 working sets of 3 to 5 reps, and that would be the majority of the workout done. You might have some accessory work to do afterwards, but because these are so neurologically demanding, we wouldn't really be doing any heavy compound lifting after that. It might be some light technical work on the deadlift, say, for example. The other way you could do them is if you kind of do a lift-specific workout where you're doing squat, bench, deadlift throughout the week, you would start with this, and that would be your main heavy work done. You wouldn't do anything heavy afterwards. Again, because it's so neurologically demanding, you're not going to be able to perform well on anything heavy after this point. Now, once you've done these for about 3 or 4 weeks, you're going to cycle them out, as I mentioned before, and that would be when you'd start to go into your peaking phase and you'd be ready to handle those heavier loads because you've already gotten your nervous system used to handling 110 to 120% on the eccentrics using the hooks. Not only that, your body is also used to handling that load with it being unstable because of the way that the weights are hanging from the hooks.